Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of RE395, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called The Dead Race, written by Arrebios. Begin recording. Humans are an interesting topic from various standpoints because they are universally discriminated against by all known galactic polities. Even in day-to-day life, walking along our streets, humans still seem to be the only acceptable target for our baser biases, something which I will remind you is not tolerated by this campus. For those of you who have never seen a human, and even for those of you who have, I will remind you that I will be showing accurate hollows of humans during today's lecture and for the remainder of this course. Jablaya, if you would. Yes, that is a human, unaugmented by the way, which I'll explain later. As the Marixian myself, I can say that they look shockingly familiar to our bodies after we've decayed for a while. I am told that the Zavians find their uniform skin coloration strikingly similar to this particularly fatal disease that plagued their homeworld. The clip among you will no doubt find their lack of body fur to be similar to the corpses of your own species. Jablaya here is our lone Tuvlek, tells me that humans look nearly identical to a particular virus that left so much of the first extrasolar colony without a living soul. I can go on and on. The point is that humans, through some as of yet unexplained quirk of biology or misfortune of statistical improbability, no one is quite sure which, look like the representation of death across all known species. Yes, all. Questions? Student question maintained for lecture notes. They don't look scary to me, Professor. Ah, yes, they don't. But if you'll permit me to play the hollow. Human speech. Recorder doesn't contain human translation software. Purchased now for 21D. Yes. Class, for those of you who don't know why Zai is Lu is as pale as you are now, the human vocal sounds usually range in certain frequencies. The same frequencies that Zai is Lu's people create on their deathbeds. Yes. Human sounds, smells, visual cues, range of movement, even cultural development is unappealing to all of us. Again, it seems a marvel of terrible, terrible luck that this just happens to be so. Earlier I mentioned that this was an unaugmented human. I'll show you a modern augmented human. Again, they are on the receiving end of bad circumstances. They do look amazingly similar to the corps of soldiers that were employed by the Brills during the last galactic war, don't they? Transhumanism, when referring to the human application, is widely rejected by galactic society because of the aforementioned Brills' use of technologically reanimated corpses that happened only so long ago. As a veteran of that war, I freely say that I nearly wet myself in terror upon first seeing a human. With some context in mind as to their physical appearance, it is obvious why most of us would prefer not to associate with humans, despite humans being quite wonderfully adaptive and successful in certain sectors of work. Do any of you know which sectors these are? Student guesses omitted. Yes. Military ground forces, acting, and medicine. The first two areas are well understood. The psychological impact of soldiers naturally appearing as the universal symbols of death cannot be underestimated. I'm sure the nearby Mount Zipoli Military Academy has an entire course centered on humans in combat. Human actors find many roles in galactic terror movies, requiring no makeup to get into character. Of course, Professor Yizlik over in the arts department teaches an entire course in the human art appreciation. Professor Yizlik tells me that human romantic genres and comedies are making a big splash in the galactic art circles due to the juxtaposition of human actors with themes of love, laughter, and life. Medicine, however, is a bit harder to wrap our heads around. Tell me, which of you would like to wake up on an operating table to see this man? Humans have two sexes operating on you. I speak from personal experience again and refer back to my previous statement about wetting myself. Class laughter omitted. However it works, human medical facilities, human doctors and nurses, have the highest rates of patient recovery than any other species. That is, I argue, because of their unfortunate appearance. Much study has been done into this particular phenomenon, especially considering that while human medical technology is quite ahead of the curve due in part to their augmentation practices, it is not entirely able to account for human medical success rates. Something else must be a major factor. And here, again, I talk from personal experience. I first met a human when I first woke up in Nevis Ares Hospital on the planet of Leluvia. I was only 9 at the time and working on a doctorate on cross-species relations, and I thought to myself, what better place than on one of the colonies of most looked-down-upon race? I was arriving by the shuttle when my shuttle's AI pilot unexpectedly malfunctioned and was involved in a crash. I woke up on an operating table surrounded by humans. For a brief moment, I did in fact think that I had perished in the crash and moved into the afterlife. I only realized where I was until after the first surgery and became lucid again. Class, I tell you, in those 4 days I've never felt more safe than I ever have. Yes, even with life-threatening surgery still scheduled, blood transfusions and limbs being cloned as replacements, you do not know how safe a person feels when surrounded by literal walking images of death, and when those corpse people look down on you and an operating table and whisper, "Death doesn't want you today." End of story. Story number 2, For the Fallen Gods, written by British Tea Company. "This is a human." There was a long quiet in the room, followed by a series of half-hearted nods and some murmuring and discussion. The specimen in question was a hairy creature for sure, black and white wisps dotting its entire body as it lay sprawled and unconscious within the containment chamber. The sleeping ape was truly an ugly sight to behold. Its open mouth revealing 2 large canines, as it closed its eyes, seemed bent on a permanent skull. "Wake it up, then." A jolt filled the air within the containment chamber, as the creature quite literally roared to life. It swiped at the air with its massive paws, a snarl emanating from its throat, as it looked through the reinforced glass and glared daggers at the scientists behind it. Given a savage pound against the screen, it did little beyond hurting its own hand as it relented, coldly watching its captors in the other room. "First things first, are you human?" Even though this thing was little more than an animal in the eyes of the researchers, there was undeniable a trace of surprise shot through the creature after being asked that question. Pausing for a moment as though to recollect its own thoughts, it faced a delegation within the other room and let out a harsh laugh. The translator pinged, "So, am I going to just be bombarded with stupid questions?" "I'll take that as a yes." A jolt was sent again in the chamber for the creature's insolence. It growled against the shock, but did little more than flinch as it hatefully glowered upon the gathering presiding over it. Sitting back down and taking a few deep breaths, there was a momentary pause before the next question was sent forward. "Where have your people been all this time?" "Hidden, away from those such as yourself, so we could bide our eventual return in secret," the translator said as the creature returned with a series of grunts. Such behavior was bestial by most standards of the galaxy. All the more reminder about how far the most advanced civilization had fallen. "That is rather obvious, but I was looking for the exact location. Our records suggest all human colonies had been destroyed during the Great Uprising. There is no way any of your kind should have been able to survive." "And I would be spit in the face of the fallen gods if I betrayed my kin by revealing to you the locations of our strongholds. Try whatever means of interrogation you have. I will not reveal such things." The ape was visibly agitated as it pressed itself against the glass, snarling at the closest people around it. Still, the officer remained undaunted as he looked at the stunky creature right in the eyes, giving a slight sigh. We'll research that for later. For the time being, who are these fallen gods you speak of? There was little records indicating such entities before your empire's destruction. What new masters do you serve?" "The masters you refer to were the ones we have always served. Even in the wake of their demise, we still do, for we will never forget the fallen gods that had uplifted us." The ape rose from its seat as it shook its head, chuckling as it felt the room shake. "Looking surprised, let me answer your earlier question. I am not human. I never was. When the gods fell, they passed all their legacy to us. Before, we were merely brutes in the jungle. Now we stand to reclaim the honor of forefathers." The room shook more as the ape grinned, watching the rubble fall from the ceiling. Plasma shots were heard in the distance, along with the harsh grunts of his kin. Moments later, an explosion rocked the room, slaying all but him. A band of his comrades arrived, clad in armor. One of his friends arrived to the glass and beckoned the captive to move away from the blast zone. Moments later, the containment field fell, and the prisoner stepped out, free at last. "About time, my friends," the gorilla said as he stepped out with a smile, collecting a spare set of gear from his friends. He gave a chuckle as he stretched. "Time we raised this world to the ground. But first, does anyone have any bananas? These bastards haven't fed me since." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.